In May of 2019, a mother of 5 went missing after dropping her children off at school. Those close to her immediately knew that something was terribly wrong, and panic washed over them as they frantically searched for her to no avail. Within days of her disappearance, arrests were already being made, but still, she was nowhere to be found. This is just the beginning of a trail of lies, betrayal, conspiracy, and death. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 31 of the Darklivity podcast. I'm your host, Kimbyr, and I'm here with my co-host, my best friend in the world, my husband, Jonathan.
Hi, Darklivity. It's the dark downward slope into the degradation of the human mind and the consequences that such darkness bring to light.
I have to say this, if you haven't watched part 1, stop what you're doing, click on the card above or the link in the description box by clicking more below. And when you're done, you can come back here because this is part 2, or you can just listen to the recap that I'm about to give you. And you can jump right into this video. It's up to you. I know I like every single detail, so I would have to go back and watch part 1. But for those of you that are caught up, you can skip the recap. Just look below for the chapter markers. Recap time. Here we go. In May of 2019, 51-year-old Connecticut resident and mother of 5, Jennifer Dulos, went missing. She seemingly disappeared out of nowhere. It was like she vanished from thin air. But later, there were signs that Jennifer had met a violent and tragic end. The morning she disappeared began like most mornings. She started by dropping off her 5 children at their private school. After leaving their school, Jennifer had 2 doctor's appointments in New York City, and she had arranged for her nanny, Lauren, to take the children to her mother's apartment in the city, where 2 of the children had dentist appointments later that day. Jennifer had planned to drive her Range Rover into New York City for more accessible parking. However, when Lauren returned to the house that afternoon, she was surprised to find that the Range Rover was still parked in the garage. This surprised Lauren because she knew that Jennifer planned to drive it that day. They had discussed it hours earlier.
Several other strange things caught Lauren's attention. The back door to the mudroom was unlocked, and that was unlike Jennifer. She prioritized security. Jennifer's purse was left on the floor next to the counter, and an uneaten granola bar was next to her morning tea. As Lauren washed the mug, she noticed the paper towel holder needed to be replaced. However, all the new rolls of the paper towel, which Lauren had just stocked the night before, were missing. Despite Lauren feeling increasingly nervous, she tried to reassure herself that there must be some sort of reasonable explanation for these oddities. Maybe Jennifer was just in a rush and accidentally leaving her purse behind.
As was her habit, Lauren texted Jennifer to inform her that the kids were having lunch, but she was surprised that she didn't receive a reply. Jennifer usually responded promptly, and Lauren sensed something was amiss. Having worked for Jennifer since 2012, Lauren knew she was very involved and an attentive mother. She was also aware of the acrimonious divorce between Jennifer and her estranged husband, Fotis Dulos. Lauren had witnessed several disturbing incidents between them. She had seen Fotis attempt to run Jennifer over with his car, and another time he chased Jennifer through the house, threatening to kill her if she tried to leave him or take their children. These experiences left Lauren with a sense of unease.
At 1:10 p.m., Lauren sent another text to Jennifer informing her that she and the children would arrive at her mother's apartment at 2:30 p.m. This message, too, went unanswered. After Lauren and the children arrived at Gloria Farber's New York City apartment, they started making phone calls and discovered that Jennifer had missed her medical appointments that day. This made their anxiety grow even more. At 4 p.m., a call to Jennifer went straight to voicemail. And that's when Lauren's heart sank. She had the feeling that something awful had happened to Jennifer. And remember, in the 7 years Lauren worked for Jennifer, she had never had trouble reaching her. When Lauren discovered that Jennifer had also missed her children's 4:40 orthodontist appointment, her immediate thought was that Jennifer's estranged husband, Fotis Dulos, had harmed her.
Lauren returned to Gloria's apartment where Jennifer's close friend Laurel Watts had arrived. Laurel believed that Jennifer was in severe danger and that Fotis was likely responsible. At that point, the decision was made to contact the New Canaan Police Department and report Jennifer as missing. Laurel informed the investigators that this behavior was ultimately out of Jennifer's character. She also shared with the police that Jennifer was in the midst of a contentious divorce and a custody battle with her estranged husband, who had recently bought a gun and threatened to kill Jennifer rather than let her win in court.
A wellness check over at Jennifer's home revealed many areas of blood in her garage, leading officers to believe she had been met with foul play. Her black Chevy Suburban was found parked at a shoulder near Waveney Park, but Jennifer was nowhere to be found. The car was still in reverse, the lights of the car on inside, almost to make it appear as though Jennifer had rushed out of it herself and fled, or maybe because she'd been kidnapped. After police examined the vehicle, it too had signs of a struggle and droplets of blood present. Search and rescue teams scoured the park where Jennifer's car was found, but they couldn't locate any signs of her.
Now, while all this is going on, Jennifer's estranged husband doesn't seem worried about her at all. His main concern is getting physical possession of their 5 children. But Jennifer had an effective restraining order against him, and he only had 1 supervised visit allowed per week, per the court. But now, all of a sudden, with Jennifer seemingly missing, Fotis believed he'd automatically be given custody. But the police let him know, in no uncertain terms, that the stipulations were not nullified just because Jennifer had vanished. Actually, he became their prime suspect. They asked him to come in to the station for questioning, but when he showed up, he had no intention of giving them any information about his wife. Instead, he brought his attorney, Mr. Pietrinker, with him, who told the police that Fotis wasn't talking. However, they did get one thing out of that visit: Fotis' cell phone. He handed it over willingly to Detective Allegro and even gave him the passcode 0000. The detective immediately put the phone into airplane mode, which is a setting that would prevent any data from being erased remotely. His attorney questioned Allegro about what he was doing, and he responded that he was securing the cell phone and the data that it contained because he believed that that phone contained evidence related to Jennifer's disappearance. He further stated that a search and seizure warrant would be sought to authorize a complete search of the phone. Fotis' attorney tried to argue that the detective had no grounds to seize the phone because they currently had no warrant. Well, the detective repeated that they were going to get one, but until they did, they wouldn't conduct a search on the phone, but they were going to secure it by holding on to it so that no potential evidence could be destroyed. Both Fotis and Pietrinker looked irritated, and then they promptly left the lobby of the police station. Okay, so now you are all caught up. Recap over.
So on May 25th, with their number 1 suspect, Fotis Dulos, not talking, the police had to wait for the digital evidence to arrive. And finally, that search warrant for Fotis' phone went through the same night at 8:50 p.m. So between this time on May 25th, upon securing the search warrant, and the May 30th vigil, they were combing through the forensic download. Not only could they now look at the contents, but they could also see where Fotis was on the day that Jennifer disappeared. And according to the phone records, it initially appeared that Fotis was home on the morning of Jennifer's disappearance because his phone was stationary at his residence in Farmington on the morning of May 24th, 2019, until it was tracked to the residence that was under construction owned by the 4 Group at 80 Mountain Spring Road in Farmington at 1:37 p.m. It's only a 5-minute drive away from 4 Jefferson Crossing where Fotis and Michelle were living at the time, and it's about an hour and 15 minutes drive away from Jennifer's house at 69 Wells. At 3:38 p.m., GPS from Fotis' phone showed it left 80 Mountain Spring and traveled to 4 Jefferson Crossing. Then, at 5:21 p.m. that same evening, Fotis' phone was tracked leaving 4 Jefferson Crossing and heading back to 80 Mountain Spring. Oddly, it was only there for about 15 minutes before it traveled back to 4 Jefferson Crossing, leaving the 80 Mountain Spring residence at 5:34 p.m.
Weird. Why the back and forth to these homes that he owns, one of which he doesn't even live in, and is kind of under construction at the time? And that wasn't even the strangest part of the search records for this phone either, which, by the way, we will be doing a whole breakdown of all of this later, but for now, there was something even more interesting to detectives.
There was. As investigators tracked Fotis' movements on the day Jennifer went missing, they noticed that at 7:10 p.m. that evening, his phone was in the area of Albany Avenue in Hartford, Connecticut. Forensic analysis revealed location data in chronological order extracted using a specialized program. This program, Celebrite, recorded each stop along his route and provided both a longitude and latitude for every location. Additionally, it displayed the locations on a map for easy visualization. It showed Fotis stopping at more than 30 locations along an approximate 4-mile stretch of Albany Avenue in Hartford, between Baltimore and Edward Streets. These streets are populated with businesses and roadwork and is known not to be the best area of town according to investigators. It was a high crime rate area. They wondered what connection Fotis would have and why he'd be out there at this time of night. With an extensive search of his GPS history, they realized Hartford wasn't a location he, or his phone at least, would normally visit. He stayed around that area until roughly 7:41 p.m., and then his phone traveled back to his house at 4 Jefferson.
30 stops. That is really odd, especially on the night that Jennifer went missing and the same day when her car is abandoned and her phone is shut off. That's why this piqued the interest of investigators, because they had a missing person and they needed to check these areas. And that's what they did. By May 26, they canvassed all of these areas looking for things like ring cameras, CCTV footage on businesses, anything that could help them pinpoint Fotis's movements and his intention for being in all of those locations that day. It was Memorial Day that Monday on May 27th, so many of those businesses with cameras were closed, but they had made a note of them and made a plan to come back the next day. Since they knew they would be looking for a vehicle, they looked up all the vehicles registered to Fotis. They learned he had a white 2014 Jeep Cherokee, a black 2014 Ford Raptor, a black 2015 Chevy Suburban, and an older Porsche Cayenne. So once they obtained the video surveillance, they were going to be looking for any vehicles matching those descriptions. One video was obtained from Benji's Jamaican restaurant, and there they saw a black Ford Raptor, which I just told you was one of the vehicles in question. When they saw that Raptor, they knew they needed to obtain all the traffic cameras during the time period from 6:45 p.m. to about 8:25 p.m. And they began seeing the same black Raptor on various cameras off Albany Avenue at different crossroads and intersections. At 7:39 p.m., the camera on Albany Avenue and Garden Street in front of Mellow Mini Market picked up the Raptor stopping, and then a man that appeared to resemble Fotis Dulos is seen getting out of the driver's seat, walking to the back of the bed of the truck, and grabbing black garbage bags out of that truck and dumping them into the garbage can on the side of the road. Then he removed what appeared to be a piece of a car liner or something like that. It's pretty large. It won't fit inside the trash can. So he walks it up towards a business and leaves it leaning against another garbage can. At this point, they determined that this was indeed Fotis Dulos.
They also found footage at 7:49 p.m. It's showing Fotis getting out of the truck, then a woman that looks like his current girlfriend, Michelle Triconis, getting out of the passenger side. Fotis throws something in the storm drain on the side of the road off Albany Ave in Blue Hills Avenue.
That's right. And they confirmed that it wasn't just Fotis in that vehicle, because you just saw Michelle. She's doing something on the ground, like wiping something on the sidewalk in that clip. So there she was with him, making these 30 stops to throw things away. That's insane.
Right, this definitely looks like them, and it was assumed that they were throwing away evidence of some kind. If they didn't appear to be guilty of anything then, they sure do now, because Fotis was 100% on investigators' radar. Based on what the investigators saw in regard to the storm drain, they sent a pump truck from the Water Authority to 1344 Albany Ave, as well as officers out there to gather up any evidence and trash bins on the side of the road.
Mind you that this is happening days after the items were thrown in the trash cans and down the storm drain.
So they aren't certain they'll even locate anything of evidentiary value. For the storm drain to be searched, the truck put a hose-like device that vacuums up water from the drain. As the vacuum was siphoning the water, a FedEx-type envelope revealed.
Okay, they got really lucky, and that's such an odd thing to find there.
Just wait until you find out what's inside. They opened it up and found 2 Connecticut license plates with the same plate number, suggesting they came from the front and back of a particular vehicle. They ran the license plate number, and dispatch told them that there was no record of these plates in Connecticut DMV. Typically, Connecticut plates would start with 3 numbers and end with 3 letters, but these had a mixture of letters and numbers. It read 5T6 WBU. On closer examination, it looked like the plates had been altered. And if you're watching, look closely. This plate looks messed up. As investigators began to examine the letters, they realized blue tape had been used to make a 1 into a T, and a B used to be a D, and the U used to be a J. So the license should have read 516 WDJ. But someone, which we think we can safely say was Fotis, made an effort to alter these plates.
And why would anyone alter plates? Well, to drive a car that they're going to do something nefarious in and hopefully not get their real license plate number recorded on any cameras. It wouldn't be as obvious if, let's say, they saw a black Raptor or a white Jeep and they think it belongs to Fotis, but then the license plate doesn't match the one on record. So that's pretty clever. They end up running the original plate number and they come back canceled from a 2007 Chevy Suburban, and it was registered to, guess who? Fotis Dulos. I don't know why this is so shocking to me, but it does shock me. That's a lot of work, but I guess if you're trying not to spend the rest of your life in prison, you will go the extra mile and then some. So this case can get very confusing, which is why doing a deep dive is very difficult, because there's so many twists and turns, so much planning, and a handful of people and vehicles are involved. And clearly, Fotis is one of them. But the police have to prove it. To me, I'd be like, cuff them already. No one goes out of their way to conceal a license plate number and then dispose of it in a storm drain on the night that their estranged wife goes missing if they have nothing to do with it. But of course, investigators feel the same way, so they keep looking through the trash bins to gather as much garbage as they could to process. They were fortunate to discover several trash bags that they believed Fotis had disposed of. These bags were transported to the state crime lab for forensic analysis, where all of the swabs of Jennifer's garage were sent to be matched with the DNA they retrieved from her toothbrush.
And this is when things get crazy and solidify that Fotis had something to do with Jennifer's disappearance and likely murder. I say murder because many of the items they found in the trash bags looked like they had blood-like substances on them. There was a sponge, a mop handle, a black garden glove, a pair of black husky gloves, a Vineyard Vines brand-striped extra-small shirt that appeared to have bloodstains on it, and it was ripped down the middle, a Intimissimi brand bra that was soaked in what appeared to be blood, and it too was cut right down the front.
Just a side note, we will be showing some of these items on screen, and that Vineyard Vine shirt was one of Jennifer's favorite shirts. She wore it all the time, and she was seen wearing it on the morning she went missing when she dropped off the kids at school. So of course, finding that shirt and bra cut the way they were down the middle and what looked like blood soaked all over them, that was huge. I think you can see a picture emerging about what happened to Jennifer. They also uncovered 2 clear ponchos from the trash, one that looked like it had blood on it and one without blood on it. 4 long, clear zip ties, 2 of them with blood, because at the time, they hadn't actually tested to know that it was blood, but these are like these dark reddish brown stains. So blood. It was blood. There was also a textile brand bath towel with blood on it, 2 plastic garbage bags that were taped together with black tape. Wow. I wonder why they had 2 trash bags taped together. I think I know why. One was put over the top of Jennifer, and the other one was put on the lower half to conceal and contain her body, and they were taped in the middle. Wow.
Exactly. They were putting all the clues together, but they kept digging and they found more within the trash. There was a plastic bag with duct tape in it, 4 more pieces of black duct tape that were crumbled up, a torn black plastic garbage bag tied in a knot on one side with red-brown blood-like stains and black tape attached to the inside, as though someone discarded all the tape into this bag and then tied it closed. Most of the incriminating evidence was retrieved from the trash bins at Albany Avenue and Green Street. Additionally, a paper towel in the trash bag at Albany Ave and Blue Hills was collected as well. The investigators swabbed everything for DNA, and the duct tape was also fingerprinted to see if anyone left prints behind.
These trash bags were clearly filled with evidence of a bloody murder and a hasty cleanup. But there was another interesting item they found inside the trash, and it wasn't apparent at first that this was important, but there was a sticker inside from a French bike company called Mercier. Now, Mercier is a renowned French company that specializes in producing high-quality bicycles that cater to both casual riders and competitive cyclists alike. And we know that Fotis is very active. He's athletic, and he actually owned this style of bicycle. It was actually a vintage bicycle that he had since his childhood, and he typically kept it in his Farmington Homes garage. Kind of interesting that a sticker from the same brand of bike is found among the trash.
As the search for the trash that Fotis disposed of on Albany Avenue continued, the police learned that many of the garbage cans on the stretch of road had already been collected and emptied. Crime scene investigators turned to the Hartford Materials Innovation and Recycling Authority's trash-to-energy plant to continue their search. I can imagine that the heat and smell of that plant made an awfully challenging task for the investigators to sift through all that garbage, right?
Yes.
But they were determined to find any clues. To conduct their search effectively, the crime scene investigators made the decision to shut down the incinerator overnight. So investigators started looking for bone fragments, but they found none. And unfortunately for investigators, the trash at the plant had been shredded into small chunks, 6 inches or less in diameter. These chunks were piled as high as 20 feet in an area about half the size of a football field. The sheer size and structure of the trash pile made it extremely difficult to identify any evidence visually, so K9 was brought into the trash-to-energy plant to detect the scent of decomposition. However, because of the amount of deceased animals and rotting food, it was difficult for the K9 to decipher what was evidence and what was not. This painstaking search at the plant lasted for several consecutive days. Investigators examined the trash, searching for any signs of Jennifer, the remnants of her belongings. Despite their best efforts, the search yielded no positive results.
But let's be clear. They could not effectively search this entire place through all that trash, especially in the compacted condition it was in. They did their best, but it doesn't mean that they could rule out the possibility that Jennifer's remains had been discarded of in the trash and already compacted. And I'm sorry to say it that way, but it's true. She could have already been incinerated. But they had to keep going and rule out any of the other places that she could have been disposed of, because now they're certain that she is deceased. Even if they didn't have DNA results back yet, that shirt and bra that was identified as belonging to her was covered in blood and cut down the middle, which suggests it was cut off of her remains at some point in order for them to be discarded of, separate from her body. And that is so sad and scary. But at this point, it's clear that Fotis and Michelle were discarding evidence of a crime. And this was enough to get an arrest warrant for both of them for tampering with or fabricating physical evidence and for hindering prosecution in the first degree, since they concealed evidence pertinent to finding Jennifer and what happened to her. So law enforcement tried to talk to both Fotis and Michelle. We know that Fotis' attorney let them know that he wasn't going to be speaking. So they called Michelle on a number of occasions, leaving messages for her to please call the New Canaan Police Department. She never responded to any of these messages. So on June 1st, 8 days after Jennifer went missing, both Michelle and Fotis were arrested at an Avon, Connecticut hotel around 11 p.m. and transported to the New Canaan Police Headquarters for processing. Both of them were held on a $500,000 bond. And at this point, Fotis secured a new attorney in relation to these new charges, a defense attorney, Norm Pattis, one of America's most controversial and successful trial attorneys. He's frequently in the news representing high-profile criminal defendants. He has won multi-million-dollar civil verdicts, and he's also represented Alex Jones recently in 2023 in regard to the defamation lawsuit by the families of the Sandy Hook school shooting. He's pretty well known and, of course, expensive, but Fotis was willing to pay. He appeared alongside Fotis, dressed in his orange jumpsuit, at his June 11th, 2019 hearing, where he wanted to address Fotis' bond. And he argued that Fotis was already being tried as guilty of murder in the court of public opinion for a crime he hadn't even been charged with because of how much media attention the case was already getting. Pattis also said he was surprised that Fotis was in court at all. Really? Okay, I know he was hired to defend Fotis, but he said that he didn't even think that the state had enough probable cause to charge him in the first place in connection with Jennifer's disappearance, and that he could account for Fotis' whereabouts for the entire day that Jennifer went missing, including a supposed early morning meeting around 8:25 a.m. with Fotis and his lawyer, Kent Mawhinney. This was his civil attorney that was handling the case that was brought against him by Jennifer's mom. Remember, we told you that his phone data placed him at 4 Jefferson Crossing in the time frame that Jennifer was seen driving to the kids' school and back. And then it didn't leave the Farmington area until that evening when it tracked to Albany Avenue, where the trash bins were. We're going to play a clip for you.
Mr. Dulos has been tried and convicted in the court of public opinion for a crime that he's not yet been charged with, and candidly I have doubts can be brought and can withstand a probable cause inquiry. Indeed, from my perspective, it's somewhat surprising he's here at all. What we know is that Jennifer went missing sometime in the early morning of the 24th and was reported missing by late day. We've been able to account for Mr. Dulos' whereabouts with independent evidence for almost all of that time, including an early morning meeting at his home with an attorney. He received a call from Greece, which we don't yet have verified phone records, but we know who the person is and have spoken to them. We believe that Ms. Triconis was in and out of the house with him from a period roughly from about 9:30 until about 1 p.m. when he next reliably surfaces in the search warrant at 1:33. So he's up in Farmington for some period of 3 to 4 hours, which on the state's theory, apparently, or the public's theory, would have given time to drive down, commit a vicious crime, dispose of the body, get rid of the car, and drive back up to Farmington. It's possible, I suppose, as a matter of mathematics, but as a matter of experience, it's a ludicrous suggestion. What we believe and what we are troubled by is the fact that in the warrant for this arrest, and this is certainly one of the factors that you can and should consider in adjusting bond, is the strength of the state's case. Search the warrant, and what you'll learn is the state can make accounts for my client's whereabouts after 1:33 that afternoon, but although it has the electronic means to do so, it refuses to produce any evidence about where he was previously. We're going to be seeking through the FBI cell site records that will show that his devices were used from his home that morning. There's no evidence that he was at the home that we are aware of. And if there's no evidence that he was at the home, it's hard for me to understand where we get the scienter or the guilty knowledge that would serve as a necessary element of hindering prosecution or tampering with physical evidence.
Attorney Fotis went on to claim that he believed the reason Michelle and Fotis were arrested was to pit them against one another, so that the first one to turn on another would get out of jail and it would force them to place blame on one another, especially since there was no body found. You know what they say, no body, no crime. So he was going with the theory that no one can prove where Jennifer is or that she's not alive, so therefore the state can't bring charges against either Michelle or Fotis. And he added that Fotis didn't even have a motive because the custody battle was actually turning positively in his direction.
Really? Because I thought it was pretty laughable with all the evidence that I have from the court documents going forward, but it was yet to be seen at this preliminary part of the investigation. But it makes my blood boil listening to his attorney defend him the way he was, just standing there like a deer caught in the headlights. Like Fotis is just looking around like, all innocent. Like, come on. It's so staged. It's this big performance for this man. And I have to add, orange is not his color.
Fotis went on to claim that Fotis had proof that he submitted in court documents that Jennifer was unstable, that she was suffering from mental illness. And Fotis pointed out that, quote, one of these things Jennifer said to Fotis in one of their last communications was, "You'll never see these kids. I'll see to it," end quote. And she said that in anger. What he was making it look like was that Jennifer had been responsible for her own disappearance, that she was a woman with a lot of issues and the one with a motive to disrupt Dulos's life for cheating on her. He also stated it was possible that she had a fatal illness and had gone somewhere to spend her final moments, as medical records revealed that she had recently undergone extensive blood work.
What? Okay, this woman lived for her children. If she was suffering from a life-threatening disease, she would want to spend her last moments with her kids. There's no doubt in my mind. So this whole Gone Girl defense that he's trying to put forth made me sick. I see through it, and I know it is not the case.
But of course, this was Fotis' defense, and his attorney was making sure to vigorously defend him, adding that the state had evidence they obtained illegally when they took his cell phone, without proper warrants, saying it was theft. And they also wanted his bond lowered from $500,000 to $100,000 because he wasn't able to afford to get bailed out.
Right. And by this time, Michelle was able to get the funds to bail herself out, most likely from her rich parents in Venezuela. But let's play that clip for you.
Perhaps the most troubling thing of all is we believe the state has illegally seized and illegally possesses evidence that is necessary to the defense. Mr. Fotis appeared at a local police department in New Canaan on the 25th, and an officer asked for his telephone. He was accompanied by counsel at that point, a lawyer named Yakov, I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce it correctly, Petranker. When the officer took the phone and Petranker asked why he wanted it, The officer wouldn't say. And we've got an affidavit from Petrenko that when he asked for the phone back, the officer refused and said, "You're not going to get it back." That's not a seizure, that's a theft. And we want the phone back. So from our perspective, there are real and substantial questions about the strength of the state's case. Obviously, there's enormous public interest in the case. My client is an established businessman. The press has combed through his financial affairs to report that he's got some difficulties financially. He's in real estate. That happens. The markets come and go. We can make a modest bond. But we were asking for the court to reduce that bond on the theory that he is not a flight risk. As your officer, I will take possession of any and all passports and not direct them, return them to anyone without your express permission. If necessary, I'll deposit them in the court clerk's office for you. But we're asking for a bond of $100,000. He is not a flight risk. There is no evidence that he is, although there is enormous speculation. I mean, you don't have to look any further than this courtroom right now. I mean, I suspect if you did a straw poll of these journalists, and I'm walking into court, where's the body? Where's the body? There is no body that we're aware of. And I'm sick and tired of hearing about it.
A theft. Okay, and they want the phone back. He sounds like a child that had their toy taken away. And he's sick of being asked, where's the body? Wow. I bet that Jennifer's family is sick to their stomachs, not knowing where she is and knowing that Fotis had something to do with it and that he probably knew. I really do not like his attorney. I know that he's just doing his job, but I can't stand him. He claimed that Fotis can't work on his defense because he's behind bars, partially because of the media hysteria. So that's why he's behind bars, because it's the media.
But the state hadn't spoken yet, and they were about to drop a bombshell. They actually found Jennifer's blood on items that Fotis deposited into those trash bins, and that the defense purposely failed to mention that part of the arrest warrant.
Well, we did too, up until now. We wanted to wait to allow you to hear everything until this point, but it's true. Remember all those items that we listed?
Well, the arrest warrant had a chart showing all the items that tested positive for Jennifer's DNA. And not only that, the state also asserted that a mixture of Fotis's and Jennifer's DNA was found on the kitchen faucet at Jennifer's 69 Wells Lane home, where she disappeared from. But his defense attorney pipes up and says that Fotis was at her house days before she went missing, so it's not surprising that there would be traces of his DNA. But we know that Jennifer and Lauren did not let him inside.
Exactly. And the detectives now have a theory that Fotis planned that he knew the park would be closed, and he purposely asked Jennifer to bring that food into her house, hoping that there would be some reason to find his DNA inside in case it was found after he killed her. Fotis also made comments about how he was scared that they'd find one of his hairs that could have been brought in by one of his children, and then it would implicate him in the disappearance. Well, remember that he conveniently shaved his entire head that Wednesday when he came to visit the kids? Well, that took care of that fear, didn't it? In hindsight, the authorities believe this canceled picnic location was premeditated and calculated by Fotis. They theorized that Fotis was planning to kill Jennifer within days and wanted to account for any forensic evidence he might leave behind as transfer evidence through his children, let's say. This is precisely what Fotis's defense attorney will claim, but the state said it's a mixture of Jennifer's blood and Fotis's DNA, and that the bond should actually be increased to $800,000, not decreased.
Counsel highlighted a lot of the warrant that brought his client here. The one paragraph he didn't hit on, and I wonder why, is that, we found Jennifer's blood on the items the defendant was depositing in those cans, confirmed by DNA by the state lab. I'm actually glad counsel brought up the bond today, Your Honor, because I was going to ask that you increase his bond based on new information, and as you know, this is the fluid investigation. The state police and New Canaan police are working on this 24/7, and they have been since the day that Jennifer disappeared. A new bit of information that I received, Your Honor, that I would ask you to increase the defendant's bond is that we are able to, the lab was able to confirm that the defendant's DNA was found in a mixture on the faucet inside of Jennifer's kitchen in the house where she went missing from. So mixture, defendant's DNA, picked with blood on the faucet in her kitchen.
He was present at the home with his children for dinner days earlier. It's hardly surprising that there'd be trace DNA.
I want to interrupt counsel.
I wasn't, but if you want to speak, I'll stop.
I'd rather address the court and he was take it that way. So
Thank you. Counsel is right, Your Honor. He was there the Wednesday before she went missing in the backyard, never in the kitchen area or not inside the house. We have several witnesses that indicate that he told them that he was never inside the house, that he was actually worried about his DNA possibly being in there because the hair could have fallen off on one of the children. So those are comments that he made to people that we actually interviewed in this investigation. So DNA in the mixture, blood on in her kitchen. I would ask that you increase the bond to $850,000.
Well, the judge denied the motion to lower the bond. At this point, defense attorney Norm Pattis told the judge that Fotis was pleading not guilty, and he was prepared to make bond at that time secured by a 401k and an IRA with Fidelity Bank. This was acceptable, so the judge released Fotis on bond, and he was also ordered Fotis to be fitted with a GPS ankle monitor and turn over his passport so he couldn't flee the country. He couldn't leave the state without the judge's permission, and there was also an order barring Michelle from having any further contact with Fotis. She, too, was ordered to wear an ankle monitor. Media captured pictures of him leaving the courthouse in his orange jumpsuit and getting back into his black SUV. Can I ask a question? Does he get to keep that orange jumpsuit?
I guess so. Souvenir of the jail. Oh, property of New Canaan Police Department. Oh, what a memento. But we haven't even told you what Michelle had been going through with her case. When she was arrested, she was brought in for questioning at the New Canaan Police Headquarters alongside her new attorney, Andrew Bowman. Now, we're not going to go into complete detail about everything that was said in this interview or ones following this one, but we do want to point out the main points Michelle asserted. Because Fotis wasn't talking, they were relying on Michelle for information about his whereabouts during the time of Jennifer's disappearance, especially since attorney Norm Pattis asserted that he had cell phone evidence plus an alibi from Michelle that proved that Fotis was home the entire day up until the time that he and Michelle drove down Albany Avenue that evening. Remember, Fotis' cell phone data showed that his phone was at 4 Jefferson Crossing that morning? Well, according to Michelle, she and Fotis were home together on the morning of May 24th. They got up around 6:40 a.m., they showered together, and then they engaged in an intimate act before she made breakfast for her daughter Nicole, got her ready for school, and drove her there.
Can you tell me with 100% certainty that you saw Fotis in the house on the morning of this case?
yes, we both.
And when I woke up, yes.
At what time?
7:40 alarm. 7:42, I was in the room.
And for how long of a time did you see him?
6:40.
And how long of a time did you see him for? Yeah.
No, just in the shower, and then I left. I did the juice.
So just to go back, at 6:40 is the time you saw Fotis first in the house, and then you don't see him again until you have lunch.
Mm-hmm.
So basically from 6:40 to lunchtime.
No, sorry. I went back to the office.
Okay, what time?
And like 5. It's not
9 o'clock?
No, that's 8.
You went back, saw him?
He was with Kent sitting at the far end of the office.
Yeah.
So that was like 8:15, 8.
Okay.
But already, this contradicted cell phone data that they had from Fotis' phone. He had set an alarm on his iPhone for 4:20 a.m. that morning, not 6:40 a.m. And that alarm was turned off at 4:21 a.m., which would suggest that Fotis got up at that time. Phones tell all. You can't hide if you're using a phone these days, especially an iPhone. There was also health data on this phone that showed movement between 4:24 a.m. and 4:52 a.m., at least 15 steps. So you know Fotis was moving his phone from one area of the room to another at the very least.
So they pressed Michelle about whether Fotis really got up with her that morning and whether he was really home at all when she got up. At which point Michelle admitted that maybe he wasn't home that entire morning, but that he was there at 6:40 a.m. when she got up, and he was there later on because he had a meeting scheduled with his civil attorney, Kent, who she claimed she saw at 8:15 a.m. in the 4-group office portion of the 4 Jefferson Crossing home, speaking with Fotis. Then she left at 9 a.m. until 11:30, and she had records to prove it. She ran 3 errands. She dropped off something with a friend who can account for her being there. Then she went to Simsbury Stop and Shop, where she took pictures of herself with a store robot, and then on her way back, she made another stop with a different friend. So she couldn't say where Fotis was during the time she wasn't home, But this was also her alibi for not being anywhere near New Canaan when Jennifer vanished. When pressed about this meeting Fotis had with Kent, she actually gave 3 different statements, all within the same interview.
Here's a simple question. When did you last see him? When did you see him?
Like I was sleeping in the office.
At age 16.
More or less, yes.
Okay, so sometime around 8 o'clock time. Yeah. Okay. And then you didn't see him again until what? Explain 1 and 2.
Yes, and then actually from 9 to 11:30, I was in and out.
First, she said she saw both of them. Later, she said she didn't see them, but she heard them both talking. And even later, she said she didn't see either one of them, but she heard Kent talking. However, she knew he was there because she greeted him that morning when he arrived.
So much back and forth. And if you know, you know. So if you're saying 3 different things, you're probably lying. She also said that when she arrived back home around noon, that the 2015 black Chevy Suburban, the one that Fotis owned, was in the driveway. The detectives asked if Fotis was home at that time, and Michelle said, well, I had lunch with Fotis, but it was a little later, not immediately. So they asked her to be clear. Was Fotis home when she arrived back at noon? And she said that he probably could have been because he has an office on top of the house, but she didn't go looking for him. When asked when she and Fotis had lunch together, first she said 1 p.m., but then she said it was probably closer to 2 p.m. because she recalled that afterward, Fotis called her to let her know they had to go to 80 Mountain Spring residence to clean it for a client meeting the next morning. She said that it was a common thing for them to call each other even if they were both at home because the house was so big. But we even do that sometimes in our condo. So I get it. And it was also common, she said, for her to help him clean residences that they were going to be showing to clients. He told her to follow him to 80 Mountain Spring in the white Jeep as he drove the Suburban, and she was supposed to bring a vacuum, a Swiffer mop, paper towels, Clorox spray, and garbage bags, which she did. She said she drove over there sometime between 2:15 and 3 p.m., but cell phone data put Fotis's phone there at 1:53 p.m. because a call is made from his phone to hers at that time. Why? If he was already at 80 Mountain Spring, why would he be calling her? She said he was at the house. It didn't make sense.
Then Michelle states that she realized her vacuum was broken. So she had to leave 80 Mountain around 3 p.m. and go back to Fort Jefferson to get a broom instead. But because of the way the Jeep was parked, she chose to drive Fotis' Suburban and was back at 80 Mountain between 3:40 and 4 p.m. And when she got there, Fotis was outside talking on his cell phone in the driveway. During the time she was gone, 2 calls were placed from Fotis to Michelle, one at 3:16 p.m. and one at 3:35 p.m. And then one was placed from Michelle to Fotis at 3:57. So, 2 minutes before she said she arrived back. But what's odd is that cell data showed Fotis' phone back at Fort Jefferson Crossing address just minutes later. So it really seemed that they were going back and forth between these 2 locations. And oddly, Michelle sends a text to a group that Fotis is part of with the phrase, "Now I'm naked," with a smiley face. That is pretty odd.
It was really odd. And the fact that she also said, oh, I had to take this car, like it sounds like it's made up.
But she said in the interview that she arrived back at 80 Mountain only leaving one time in the Suburban and proceeded inside to clean the windows, but she gave up because the house was too big. And at this point, Fotis was waiting for his employee, Pavel Gamini, to arrive at 80 Mountain Spring. A text on Fotis' cell data showed he texted Pavel at 2:13 p.m. from 80 Mountain Spring, asking for Pavel's ETA. And Pavel responds, 4:30 p.m. After this, Fotis' cell pings off a tower close to Fort Jefferson, and it remained there until 5:02 p.m. And at 5:16, it makes a call to Michelle from 80 Mountain Spring. Something fishy seems to be going on because there's so much movement, but Michelle made it seem as though this whole time, Fotis is at 80 Mountain cleaning while waiting for Pavel and Michelle to come help clean as well. But his phone clearly traveled back to Fort Jefferson and was there for at least an hour.
Yeah. It is really fishy, and you'll know why soon enough. But I also had to laugh at Michelle's excuse as to why she gave up cleaning the house. It was too big. It's like she didn't realize or was aware that this is a massive 11,000 square foot mansion, 5 bedrooms, 5 full bathrooms, plus 3 half bathrooms on a 5-acre lot of land.
It seems silly that they wouldn't get a cleaning crew to do this like most realtors do.
They would. This is not what really happened. I mean, we all know that by now, but We're just telling what Michelle said at this point. And then as a treat for all of her hard work, all their hard work, Fotis offered to take Michelle to Starbucks, according to her, but not a Starbucks nearby. No, not at all. The one way out in West Hartford. And she explained that they left 80 Mountain Spring in the black Ford Raptor. So now they're in like their third vehicle of the day. Must be nice, I guess. And they went to Starbucks around 6:30 or 7 p.m. But she was on her cell phone the whole time and not really paying attention, according to her. But then she said she looked up and she noticed that they weren't at Starbucks. Instead, in her words, they were in a creepy area with fire and police vehicles. Okay. And then she said Fotis stopped and threw something away from the back of the truck, a bag or something, but she doesn't know what it was. She doesn't know what was in it. She said that she asked Fotis why they were there, and she did admit to the detectives that Fotis did have a habit of discarding of construction materials in garbage bins sometimes, but not all the way in this area. It didn't make sense to her. When asked about how many times they stopped, Michelle made it seem like it was only once, but then they showed her the CCTV footage, and she confirmed that was Fotis in the Raptor, stopping at various trash bins and throwing things away. And that was her seen in the passenger seat. When they asked her what she thought was in the back of the truck, she said, I don't know. I wasn't looking. I was on the phone. I was probably talking to my friend P2. But then she said after that, they went to Starbucks. After this interview, the investigators did pull that CCTV footage from inside the Starbucks, and they did confirm that Michelle and Fotis were captured inside purchasing food and drinks at 7:59 p.m. But clearly, they didn't have to travel 7 miles all the way in this other area where Fotis's phone had never been before just to get Starbucks. It was obvious that this was a trip designed to dump evidence, and Michelle, by her own admission, put herself with Fotis as it was being carried out. It seemed hard to believe that Michelle didn't have any knowledge of what her boyfriend was doing, even if she was engrossed in her phone. Detectives weren't buying her story, especially because they were gathering more CCTV footage and other surveillance videos, street cameras, ring cameras, etc., to track every vehicle that they know Fotis either owned or had access to, as well as search warrants for all of Fotis's properties. And they were combing through all of that data. But for now, Michelle had been bonded out of jail, so she was free to go. They planned to bring in Kent, which is his civil attorney, and Pavel for questioning.
The day after Michelle's arrest and interview, while Fotis remained in jail awaiting his bond hearing, a search was conducted at Fort Jefferson Crossing. You know, the home he once shared with Jennifer and their children, but now shared with Michelle and her daughter. During the search, investigators discovered something highly significant and very incriminating. In the 4-group area office, they found a trash can containing a crumpled piece of paper. When unfolded, it revealed a 2-page handwritten document with 2 distinct styles of handwriting, later confirmed to be Fotis's and Michelle's. The document outlined the activities Fotis and Michelle engaged in on May 24th and the 25th, broken down into roughly 1-hour intervals.
Wow. I've never seen anything like this before. It's very weird and very telling. It's like they're trying to get their story straight about what they did in that 24-hour period, which just happens to be when Jennifer goes missing.
Exactly, and going forward, these documents were referred to as the alibi script. And later, 2 more photocopies of the same document were found inside a computer bag that was located in one of the bottom cubbies in the mudroom. And what was interesting is that what Michelle relayed to authorities during her first interview was almost verbatim to what was written on that alibi script.
Right, exactly. It's a script. It's meant to be practiced enough to commit it to memory. But I guess they didn't think they would be arrested so soon, because too bad they didn't throw them away in those trash bins on Albany Avenue. But maybe they hadn't memorized them enough yet. I don't know if they're clear enough on the screen, but this one is Michelle's script, and you can see. It starts at, I woke up and went to take a shower with Fotis. Black leggings, black Adidas, black sweater. So it even accounts for what she was allegedly wearing that day. Who does this?
Guilty people.
Exactly. But Fotis and Michelle have reasons for writing this down. According to them, it's not a script. It's not because they're guilty. It's an account of their day because they're innocent. And they were instructed by their lawyer to make a timeline of the day to account for their whereabouts, so that they could confirm their alibi. And that's what they were doing. That's why they made copies. It was for their lawyers. I'm not buying that. There was also an entire call log written out. Like, girl, you don't know that there's technology on your phone where you can simply screenshot your incoming and outgoing calls, or better yet, that the detectives can extract all of that information, even the deleted ones. But there it is in Michelle's handwriting on her version of events, with all of her calls, how long they were, and who they were to and from, starting with one at 1 a.m. from her daughter, who was asleep in the next room, but woke up due to a thunderstorm and allegedly called Michelle because she was scared. The next call that comes in was from her mom at 8:02 a.m., and the calls go on throughout the entire day up until the night around 8:15 p.m. The documents were both written on the front and back of the piece of papers.
The one in Fotis' handwriting also mentions the call from Nicole to Michelle at 1 a.m. Then he goes on to say that he woke up at 6:30 and that he and Michelle took a shower together. He also makes a note of his clothing for the day, which, according to this document, were Lucky Brand jeans, a blue shirt, and he had coffee and cereal for breakfast. And cereal was spelled Serial. Either a Freudian slipped or that he is truly that arrogant.
No, it's because he's a serial liar.
Fotis' handwriting to us is harder to read than Michelle's, and his notes are extremely disorganized, but they generally align with Michelle's account for the day. His document lists everything he did, what he wore, who he spoke with, who called him, and the locations he visited, even to what he ordered at Starbucks. And we'll dive into the specifics later and point out any discrepancies, as detectives are still gathering evidence from CCTV footage and conducting interviews.
What I thought was humorous was at the bottom where Fotis writes that they went to the West Hartford Starbucks. He said they had 2 Frappuccinos, and then he adds, didn't like the sandwich. It's so important to note in your alibi script. Make sure to relay that to Starbucks just so you know that Fotis Dulos does not approve of the food. He's too good for Starbucks sandwiches. I didn't know if this was like his narcissism, that he's so important he had to like make that little note, or if it was a detail, because a lot of people when they're lying, they go into real deep detail. They try to pull as many details as possible so you'll kind of cloud what they're saying. Fotis also accounted for what he was doing on Saturday, the day after Jennifer went missing, and he notes that he called Lauren, he spoke with the police, etc. And of course, with all this new information, they bring Michelle in again for her second interview. This time it's conducted at her lawyer, Mr. Bowman's office. She's seated at the conference table with a number of detectives on the case. And though it was recorded with both audio and video, the quality of the audio is really bad. So I'm going to try to relay what Michelle told authorities, but if we do find any that's good enough to play, we will play it. Detective Kimbyr is leading the interview, and he let Michelle know from the beginning that this was her chance to see her family, her daughter, and her mother, and not be charged with murder. And that this was going to be her one and only chance to tell the truth, that they want to know who was involved and where Jennifer is.
This is your chance. Right now, you're charged with indirect prosecution. Okay? This is your chance. If you want to see your family, your daughter, your mother, and not be charged with murder, this is your chance. It's your one and only chance. You have to tell us. We know you weren't there. We know you were lying. You were sloppy. We want to know who was involved and where Jennifer is.
Because they said that they know she knows. Michelle was visibly upset. She's wiping tears from her eyes. Her attorney assures them that she will tell them the truth about what she knows to the best of her ability. And Kimbyr responds that they want her to start with the night of May 23rd, the night before Jennifer went missing.
So Michelle agrees to talk, but warns she might not get the exact times right. And Kimbyr says that's fine. She starts telling them what she knows, but begins at 1 a.m., just like the alibi script, without mentioning the day before, even though that's what they asked about. The detectives are really interested in the night before, the 23rd, because they think that's when the planning happened. Turns out, Fotis had a dinner party at 4 Jefferson Crossing that night, but Michelle didn't mention it in her first interview since they were only focused on the day Jennifer went missing. But here's the strange part. During the dinner, Fotis' phone data shows he made a trip to 80 Mountain Spring Road right in the middle of the party. That's the same place he told Michelle to meet him the next day to help clean. Why would he need to do that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And Kimbyr wants to know if Michelle will spill the details, so he stops her. And he explains that they executed a search warrant at 4 Jefferson Crossing, and they have more information since the last time they spoke. they found the script. And essentially he told her, stop speaking from the script and tell them what happened to Jennifer and where Jennifer's body is. They also said at that moment they had enough to charge Fotis with murder, but not enough to charge her yet. It's almost like a threat to her, like, if you don't speak, we're going to charge you. They also tell her that in all likelihood, Fotis is going to be arrested for murder, adding that they know she was not at the murder scene, but they know she has information.
So Michelle is super adamant that what they found isn't some kind of script. And at one point, she tries to explain, but Kimbyr cuts her off, saying he's not interested in talking about the script right now.
No. You know that we've done search warrants, executed search warrants at Fort Jefferson. Right?
Except that you are inside the house looking for things.
That's where you live. Fort Jefferson, probably. And you live there with Fotis Dulos
And your daughter.
and your daughter Nicole.
Yes.
And what's the called?
Oh, where?
You have to understand, we have more information we had last time we spoke. So do you remember when we talked about how you felt that you were going through a list or a script? What?
Yes.
Okay. We found these full of papers.
Yes.
We don't need to go through those. We need to know. What do you know about what happened to Jennifer Dulos on the 24th of May in Weird for Lies? You have enough information right now for Fotis. You know,
Okay.
right now you are not arrested for murder, he's not arrested for murder. You both are arrested for tampering with evidence and then hither prosecution.
Yes.
In all likelihood, he will be arrested for murder. You need to tell us what you know. This is coming from the state's attorney. Just listen. You need to tell us what you know about Jennifer's murder and Fotis Dulos. We know that you weren't there at the murder scene. At the time, we know you have information. We need to know that we do not want to go through. So you don't want to go through the script because we found the script. And when we start to review the script, the reversed story that we found documentation of, our instructions from the state's attorney at the walk out that door. When we walk out that door, yet this is coming from the state's attorney. So please tell on what you script. I want to hear what happened to Jennifer. And I want to hear who was involved in her murder.
I'm not so glad that I don't know. But can I say something? Get upset to me.
I'm not upset. I just want you to understand where we're coming.
Smile with her. Someday.
Okay, you'll have a chance. You found a piece of paper that tailors your statement to us. We don't want to talk about that.
But eventually, it does come out. Michelle says that she was actually there when Fotis was on the phone with his old attorney, Jacob Piedraker. The lawyer told Fotis to write out a detailed timeline of everything he did on Wednesday the 22nd, the day he went to see the kids at Jennifer's for visitation. He wanted Fotis to note everything, especially whether or not he went inside Jennifer's house. Michelle said she was surprised because Fotis had told her the visit happened at Grace Farms Park, not Jennifer's house. Then she remembers Fotis saying, "No, I didn't go into the house," and Piedraker asking him, "Where did you guys eat?" And Fotis kept saying he didn't go inside, but adding, "Yeah, I hugged the kids, we played, I don't know if a hair went in." That was such a weird detail.
Especially since he already shaved his entire head. And that was the hair comment that we were talking about.
Yeah, so Michelle said that after Fotis got off the phone, she confronted him. She said, "Fotis, where were you on Wednesday? Because you told me you went to Grace Farms."
She is an extremely jealous woman, and she was very jealous of Jennifer. And the fact that she's overhearing this conversation with his attorney and Fotis is now at Jennifer's house, this really upset her. So this is why she's mentioning it. And she's not mentioning it lightly. She's like, I was asking him, like, why were you there? What were you doing? Like, are you trying to get back with Jennifer?
And that's when Fotis admitted that he actually had gone to Jennifer's house, but he ate outside with the kids. Then he told her how his lawyer, Piedraker, was advising him to write down specific details, whether any plates were put inside or if he used the bathroom. But Fotis kept insisting to Michelle that he never actually went inside Jennifer's house.
which we know is a lie because his DNA is found on the kitchen faucet and on the doorknob leading into the home from the garage. But we'll get to all of that later. At this point, Kimbyr confronts Michelle about why both she and Fotis failed to record the dumping of the trash on Albany Avenue in their timeline. And Michelle actually admits, she's like, oh yeah, that looks bad. But we were trying to withhold any potentially incriminating things because Fotis said only write highlights of your day. That's what he told her. At that point, Kimbyr asked if Fotis was dictating what story Michelle should tell the police. And she responded that obviously it was for her to say it, but that he was trying to make her be more accurate. But instead of just filling in the things that she didn't know, he was filling it in with lies, things that were not true. And she knew that. So essentially, he's telling her to lie for him. If you're innocent, why would you lie? So now they want Michelle to go over all the same things she told them in her first interview. And there were discrepancies this time. She again told them that Fotis was at the house when she woke up. But by now, they knew for a fact she was lying because they found a lot of video evidence to prove Fotis was not at home. Although it appeared he was because his phone was. And why was that? Well, they theorized he left it there on purpose so he wouldn't be tracked, which again is something a guilty person does. We all know that our phones give away everything. So he thought leaving it behind would leave no trace of him, but he forgot that there's street cameras, there's residential ring cameras, bus cameras like in the Dan Markel case, and OnStar vehicle data, Waze map app records, among other things.
And there are so many other things we'll cover, but we'll do it in part 3. It's a deep dive, and we don't want to rush through anything because we've already uncovered way more than we originally knew about this case. It is mind-blowing how deep this case actually goes.
Exactly. My brain hurts right now, and especially when I was sifting through all the affidavits, the search warrant information, the arrest warrants, the timeline. This was a very calculated crime, and we really want to showcase all of its deviousness. So until next time, we hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you all for watching.
And we will see you in our next video. Bye.